The day Mark died, Emily felt the world stop. Not in a loud crashing way, but in a slow, aching silence that crept into everything. The house, once full of laughter and quiet comforts, now echoed with the kind of stillness that made her chest hurt. The Vermont fall had arrived with orange leaves and crisp winds, but she hardly noticed. Her husband, her best friend since high school, was gone. And no matter how many casseroles people dropped off or how many sympathy cards she stacked on the counter, nothing filled the space he left behind. For months, she moved through life like she was watching herself from far away. Wake up, brew 1 cup of coffee instead of 2, fold laundry for 1, sit at church in the same pewbot with an empty space beside her. Mark had been that steady presence, the one who fixed the fence when it leaned too far and held her hand when her mom passed. Now, even the smallest decisions felt heavier. The kids were both in college now, calling often, checking in. But they had their own lives, and Emily didn't want to pull them back just because her heart was broken. She was only 38, too young to be called a widow, too tired to start over. Most days, she just went for long walks around the lake, watching the seasons change like they were trying to remind her that time still moved forward even when you didn't want it to. Then one Sunday afternoon, a knock came at the door. She opened it to see her older brother, James, standing there with his familiar half-smile. His hair was a little grayer than she remembered, and his eyes held something deeper than usual, maybe concern, maybe guilt. James lived 2 towns over, worked in construction, and always had some project going. He was the kind of person who never stayed in one place too long. But now he looked like he needed to say something important. "Hey, Em," he said, gently. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside, still in her house sweater, hair loosely tied up. She didn't bother pretending she'd been busy. These days, she rarely was. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table Mark had built the year after they married. James looked around the kitchen like it had aged more than just a few seasons. Emily poured them both some tea, sitting quietly as he stared into his mug. "I've been thinking," he finally said, clearing his throat. "About you. About this house. Everything, really." She gave him a look, cautious. "Okay." He rubbed the back of his neck like he was nervous, which wasn't like him. "I know you've been trying to hold it together. And I know you think you're doing fine on your own. But, this place is too quiet. And you shouldn't be here alone." She frowned. "James, I'm okay. I promise. I've got friends, church, the kids call all the time." "I know," he said quickly. "But that's not the same." Okay. She watched him closely. "What are you trying to say?" "I want to move in," he said. Then added, "just for a while." Her eyebrows lifted. "You move in here?" He smiled, a little embarrassed. "I could help out. Fix the roof. Keep you company. Make sure you're not spending every evening talking to the coffee pot." Emily didn't know what to say. The idea was kind, maybe even helpful, but also strange. James had never been the settling type. He hadn't lived with anyone since their 20s, and here he was offering to move in like this was normal. She hesitated. "James, I appreciate it, really, but I don't want to be anyone's responsibility." "You're not," he said, leaning forward. "You've always looked out for everyone else. Maybe now it's your turn to be taken care of even, just a little." His words sank in deeper than she expected. Maybe because no one else had offered that. Maybe because she didn't know how much she needed it. Still, fear tugged at her chest. Letting someone into this quiet world she'd built since Mark passed it wasn't simple. It wasn't just about sharing space. It was about letting someone close again. She looked out the window at the backyard where the trees were starting to shed their color. The wind rustled the last of the leaves on the maple tree Mark planted years ago. The thought of spending another winter here alone made her heart ache in a way she didn't want to admit. James was watching her carefully, not pushing, just waiting. "Okay," she said softly. "Just for a while." He nodded, relief in his eyes. "Just for a while." She smiled faintly, unsure if she was making the right decision. But knowing that maybe, just maybe, something was beginning to shift, not a full step forward, but maybe the first one. And she had no idea then. that this decision would change everything. James moved in quietly, with just a few bags and a box of tools. Emily cleared the guest room without fuss. It felt strange having someone else in the house against someone who filled the quiet with footsteps, cabinet doors opening, and soft humming in the hallway. At first, they gave each other space. Emily kept to her routine's early walks, reading by the fireplace, cooking for 1.5 now instead of 1. James helped around the house, not saying much, but fixing things that had gone untouched since Mark passed. The broken porch step, the squeaky screen door. The back fence slowly repaired in a quiet rhythm that seemed to steady the house. And Emily wasn't sure how she felt. Grateful, of course, but also off balance. It had been so long since someone shared her space that she wasn't sure how to fit someone else into the picture without feeling like something was being taken away. One morning, as she poured coffee, James joined her at the kitchen table, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His hair was tousled, and he wore an old sweatshirt from their high school days. It made her smile without thinking. "You slept in," she said. "I didn't know I was allowed to." He grinned. "You've always been the early riser." She sipped her coffee. The silence between them wasn't awkward, just quiet, familiar. James tapped his fingers on the table, then finally said, "I've been meaning to ask you something." Emily looked at him. "Okay." He took a breath. "What if we made this more permanent?" She blinked. "Permanent? What do you mean?" "I mean, me staying here? Not just for a few months, for longer. Maybe even for good." The words settled heavily in the room. Emily stared at him, unsure if she heard right. "James, I thought this was just temporary." "You said a while. You have your own life, your job. I've been thinking about that." He cut in gently. "I can work from here. Most of my projects are flexible now. And honestly, I've never really had a reason to stay in one place. Maybe I do now." She felt her heart jump, but didn't let it show. "Why now?" she asked, her voice softer. James leaned back in his chair. "Because I like it here. I like being here with you." Emily looked away, unsure how to respond. The kitchen suddenly felt warmer, like the air had changed. This wasn't just about help around the house anymore. "I don't want you to stay out of guilt," she said. "I'm not," he replied firmly. "I'm here because I want to be. I see how much this house meant to you and Mark. I see how much you're trying to hold everything together. But you don't have to do it alone." His words touched something inside her. For months, maybe even years before Mark died, she'd carried so much alone, taking care of the home, the kids, the small details no one noticed unless they went undone. Now James was offering something simple but rare, steady presence. Still, doubt lingered. "People will talk," she said. "They'll wonder what's going on." James shrugged. "Let them. You've lost your husband, not your right to be cared for." She stared at him. It was strange, this man sitting across from her. Her older brother, but not the wild, drifting version she'd known in their younger years. This version was calm, grounded, thoughtful. "James," she said carefully, "I don't know what I'm ready for." "I'm not asking for anything more than this," he said. "Just a chance to stay. To be here however you need me." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. She'd always thought of James as carefree, never serious. But maybe she hadn't really known how much he'd changed over the years. Maybe grief wasn't the only thing that could make a person grow. That night, Emily sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around her and a book in her lap. James came out with 2 mugs of tea and handed her one without saying a word. They sat together, watching the sky shift from orange to deep blue, and for a moment everything felt still in a good way. "I used to be afraid of slowing down," James said quietly. "Felt like if I stopped moving, I'd feel everything I'd been running from." Emily glanced at him. "And now? I think I'm tired of running," he said. "And this place. This life, even with the pain, it feels real." She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away when he leaned slightly closer. A few days later, James found an old photo album in the attic while he was fixing a leak. He brought it down and they sat at the kitchen table, flipping through pictures, Mark smiling at a barbecue. The kids in Halloween costumes, all four of them on a beach trip years ago. I forgot about this day, Emily said, tracing a photo of Mark holding her hand. James looked at her, then said, I miss him too. It surprised her. You do? He was a good man, James nodded. I didn't always say it, but I looked up to him. The way he loved you. The way he loved life. Her throat tightened. He made everything feel simple. And you made him better, James said. You were the heart of that home. Emily closed the album, her fingers lingering on the cover. I don't know how to build something new, she said. Not yet. You don't have to, he replied. You just have to let something grow, slowly. She looked up at him, her eyes full of questions and hope she wasn't ready to admit. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone in her grief. Maybe this wasn't about replacing anyone. Maybe it was about healing, with someone who didn't try to rush her through it as she stood to make dinner. James got up to rolling up his sleeves like it was his kitchen now, too. They moved in quiet coordination, chopping, stirring, sharing space in a way that felt new but natural. And Emily, though still holding on to her sorrow, began to wonder if letting someone in again might be exactly what her heart needed. She didn't know what came next. But she knew this. Life had paused for a while, but maybe now was beginning again. The weeks passed quickly after James settled in. The house slowly warmed with the sounds of life again, the clinking of dishes, the creak of the wooden floor, the quiet hum of old music from the radio. Emily noticed it most in the mornings. She woke to the smell of coffee and the soft thud of James's footsteps in the kitchen. It was a strange feeling having someone around after so long. The emptiness she'd carried since Mark's passing seemed to soften in small ways. James wasn't just a guest. He became part of the daily rhythm. He fixed things that Emily hadn't even realized needed attention, the porch step that Mark never got to repair, the loose kitchen cabinet door, the garden gate that creaked in the wind. He took on these tasks without fuss, as if caring for the house was also a way of caring for her. It comforted Emily in ways she couldn't explain. One afternoon, Emily returned from a walk to find James planting bright mums by the front porch, the cold autumn sun casting long shadows. She smiled quietly. It was the kind of small, thoughtful act Mark used to do every year. Watching James work with steady hands reminded her of how much things were changing, not just the house, but her heart too. She found herself laughing again sometimes, something she hadn't done fully in months. James's jokes were simple, sometimes silly, but they filled the spaces that had once held silence. They shared old stories from childhood, memories of their parents, and the summers they spent by the lake. In those moments, Emily felt like the past and present were gently weaving together. One evening, storm blew in fast and heavy. The power went out, leaving the house wrapped in darkness. Candles flickered on the tables, casting warm light on the walls. Emily and James sat together at the kitchen table, shuffling a deck of cards by candlelight. The storm outside rattled windows and sent leaves swirling across the porch. The quiet between them was peaceful. Emily felt a closeness she hadn't expected. They were simply two people sitting side by side, finding comfort in each other's presence. James looked at her with a seriousness that caught her off guard. You know, he said softly, I used to be jealous of him. Emily's heart skipped. Jealous of Mark. James nodded. Yeah, you two had this quiet, strong kind of love. The kind I always wished for. It was real, steady, something I admired. Emily looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. The honesty in his voice surprised her. She hadn't expected to hear that from him. The room felt smaller suddenly, charged with emotions neither of them wanted to say aloud. I wonder if I'll ever find that kind of love, she admitted quietly. After everything, I'm not sure I can. James reached out almost instinctively and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. You deserve it. You have so much love left to give. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but something softer, a quiet hope she hadn't allowed herself in a long time. She looked at him, and for a moment the distance between them disappeared. That night, Emily lay awake thinking about James's words. She realized how much she'd been closing her heart, holding on to the past so tightly that she forgot there could be something new. It wasn't about forgetting Marquette, it was about making room for life again. Days later, she found James on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. She joined him, feeling the cold air bite at her cheeks. They sat in silence for a while, sipping warm drinks, the sky above vast and endless. "I'm tired of running," James said suddenly, breaking the quiet. "Not just from my past, but from feeling things. Being scared." Emily turned to him, curious. "This house, this time with you, it's made me realize I don't want to be alone anymore. Even if it's complicated, even if it's messy. I want to be here." Her heart stirred again. She hadn't expected this kind of confession. Not from her brother, not from anyone. But she didn't pull away. "I'm scared too," she whispered. "Scared of what comes next?" James smiled gently. "We don't have to have all the answers now." In the weeks that followed, they grew closer, not in a rush, but in quiet steps. They shared meals, late-night talks, and small moments of comfort. Emily found herself leaning on James in ways she never had before. And he seemed to understand her without needing explanations. One evening, James brought down an old photo album from the attic. Together, they flipped through the pages, pictures of family gatherings, birthdays, and vacations from years ago. Mark's smile was everywhere, bright and full of life. Emily's throat tightened. James looked at her, his voice soft. "I miss him. I always did, even before he was gone." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Me too." But James continued, "I see how much you loved him. And I see how much you still have to love. Not just for Mark, but for yourself." Emily looked up, tears shining in her eyes. "I don't know how to move forward." "Then we'll take it slow," James said. "Together." There was no rush, no pressure, just a steady presence that made the future seem less scary. Emily realized that love wasn't just one story, and loss didn't mean the end. It was a journey, sometimes winding and uncertain, but always possible. She wasn't alone anymore, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start healing. Winter came slowly to this small Vermont town. Snow dusted the trees, blanketing the world in white silence. The house, once so quiet after Mark's passing, now felt full in a way Emily hadn't known was possible again. With James there, it had warmth not just from the fire crackling in the hearth, but from a sense of life slowly returning. Days were shorter, nights colder, but inside the walls, something new was growing. Emily noticed how much she smiled these days, how her shoulders no longer carried the weight of grief alone. James was no longer just her brother who helped around the house. He was a steady presence, a quiet comfort in the long winter evenings. They cooked together, shared stories, and sometimes just sat in silence, letting the easy companionship fill the space. It felt familiar and strange all at once. One night, after a soft snowfall had covered the world outside, Emily found herself sitting by the window, staring out at the frosted branches. James joined her with 2 mugs of hot cider, setting one beside her before settling in with a thoughtful look. "You've changed," he said quietly. Emily smiled, a little surprised. "I guess I have. Not just the way you look. You seem lighter. Like the weight isn't crushing you anymore." She nodded, tracing the rim of her mug. "I didn't think I'd ever feel normal again. But having you here, it's made a difference." James's eyes held something deeper, a mix of tenderness and something Emily hadn't dared to name before. "You deserve happiness, Em, more than anyone I know." Her heart beat a little faster, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't know what that looks like now." He reached out, taking her hand gently. "Maybe we don't need to know right away. Maybe it's enough to just be here, together." The warmth of his touch spread through her, a soft comfort she had missed so much. For years, her heart had been guarded, locked tight around the memory of Mark, but now, with James by her side, she felt the edges of that lock beginning to loosen. In the following weeks, They found themselves growing closer in ways that surprised them both. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. There were no grand declarations or rushing moments. Instead, it was in the quiet ways James stayed a little longer in the kitchen when she cooked, the way their hands brushed when reaching for the same book, the shared laughter over small jokes only they understood. One afternoon, Emily caught James watching her while she worked in the garden, planting bulbs for spring. The sun was low in the sky, casting a golden glow around her. For a moment, he simply admired the way she moved, the gentle strength she carried. "James," she said softly, turning toward him. He smiled, a little shy. "I think I'm falling for you." The words hung in the air, fragile and real. Emily's breath caught. She looked down, unsure how to answer. It wasn't wrong to feel this way after all. They'd shared so much, but it was new, unexpected. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of what people will think. Scared of what this means." Stepped closer. "We don't have to rush. We'll figure it out together." Her heart fluttered, a mix of hope and hesitation. For so long, love had been tied to loss. But maybe now it could be tied to something new. They moved slowly, allowing their feelings to grow naturally. There were hard days, 2 moments when the past pressed in, when grief resurfaced unexpectedly. But through it all, they leaned on each other, finding strength in their shared history and the promise of something more. One chilly evening, Emily's daughter called from college. The conversation was warm and full of updates, but when her daughter asked about James, Emily hesitated. "He's been a big help," she said finally. "More than I ever expected." Her daughter laughed softly. "Sounds like you've got a good friend there." Emily smiled. "More than a friend, maybe." The call ended with laughter and promises to visit soon. Emily felt a quiet joy she hadn't known she could have. As spring approached, the garden began to bloom. Emily and James spent afternoons outside planning new projects for the house and dreaming quietly about the future. They talked openly about their fears and hopes, building a foundation stronger than either had thought possible. One morning, as the first crocuses pushed through the thawing earth, James surprised Emily with a small bouquet of wildflowers. He handed them to her with a shy smile. "For new beginnings," he said. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from gratitude and love. She took his hand, feeling the steady warmth she had come to trust. "We've both lost so much," she whispered. "But maybe this is what comes next." James nodded. "Whatever comes, we face it together." That day, Emily understood that love isn't always about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about showing up, being present, and having the courage to open your heart again. The house, once heavy with silence, now held laughter and hope. Emily no longer felt like she was walking through a shadow. With James by her side, she was ready to step into the light. And this time, she wasn't alone.